In this lesson, we're going to slow down a little bit and answer a question about masks and creating a megaphone kind of icon. So let's create a new composition by clicking the new composition button over here. And I'll just call this megaphone. And we want to choose a preset that's going to be useful to us in our project. So I'm going to choose 1920 by 1080, 24 frames a second, and the background color doesn't really matter. So I'm going to click this drop down menu and say fit so that we see the entire screen here. And I'm going to start by creating a solid. So I'm going to right click down here and say new solid. And this is going to be the background main. And let's just make this some kind of a teal, like a light teal color. Okay, and then we're going to make a background for the icon. So I'll add a new solid. Same process, right clicking down there. And I'm going to have this be somewhat orange-ish. And we can always change these colors later if we don't like them by going to, let's say we don't like this. And, how do we change that? We can select the layer and right click in the effects panel here. We can see effects controls. And we can go down to generate fill. And now we get a new color. Now we can change the color to whatever we want. So that's one way to update a solid. Cool. So let's create this background. I'll hit enter to rename it. And I'll say BG megaphone. And I'm going to select a shape tool up here. And I don't want the square, I want the circle. So I'm going to click and hold it. And I'll have the ellipse tool here. And if I shift click, then I can get a perfect circle. If I let go of shift, it's going to be wherever my mouse is. But if I hold down shift, it'll stay a circle. And now I can double click this and go to align. And I can just align it to the center with these buttons. Align to this horizontal and align to the vertical center. And now we can start to make the megaphone within this little icon here. So we're basically going to be making a lot of shapes like we just did with the circle, but we need to combine them in a way to create one big shape. So I'm going to start with the kind of rear end of the megaphone, and I'm going to make this be like a light yellowish, maybe even less saturation. If I want to switch to saturation here, I can just click these little radio buttons, and then I have that option. So I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to say the back, and now I can go back to this tool set by left clicking and holding, and I'll go to the rounded rectangle tool. So I'm just going to click anywhere, and then by holding up and down I can actually change the radius of these corners. So I'm just going to hold it down until it's something that I like, and that's fine. So I'm going to hit V on my keyboard to pull up the kind of cursor tool here. And I'm going to kind of center this as well with the align tool over here. So we have our first little piece. Let's create a piece that goes on top of it. It's kind of the middle section. So I'll go right click new solid and create a gray type of material. Let's go to a low saturation and let's just go saturation all the way down. And for brightness, let's just go somewhere kind of in the middle. We can just say 50% here. And I'll just call this middle. I'll use that same tool and I'll draw this out, except I want the corners of this to be a little tighter. So I'll just hold down the down arrow and wait until the edges get a little closer there. And I'll put this somewhere maybe like this. And we can use the align tools again to line that up. And let's move the back over a little bit. And I'm going to just use my arrows and shift to knock this over a little bit. And we'll do something like in here-ish. And now I'm going to make the actual megaphone piece. So I'm going to create a new solid again. And I'm going to make this be a much brighter gray. So let's go up here somewhere, let's say 90%. So we don't want it to be totally white. We'll just call this the funnel. And let's create a rectangle. And even though it's a funnel, we can start with this rectangle tool and then we can make it a funnel later. So let's click and drag this out. I'll just hold down Shift to make it a square, perfect square. And then we can use the align tools here to get it down to the middle. So now we can actually go in here, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit, holding down spacebar and clicking to move around. I'm going to select just these two endpoints here. So I've selected that one. I'll scroll down here, hold down Shift and click that one. So now I have these two selected. When I double click it, now I get the kind of transformation thing, but because they're so narrow, it's hard to see, but it is there. So now I can drag this down, and if I hit Shift, it will stay in a line. And if I hit Command and hold that as well, I'm holding Shift and Command, then it'll bring it in. So I'm basically trying to get this to line up exactly with this edge, okay? So I'm going to hit Enter, and I'm going to zoom in really close and see if this thing is actually right on the edge. And it looks like it is. I'm going to go down here. Looks like it's right on the edge. Cool. Now I can zoom out and grab this and bring these over here. So I just did the same thing, Shift selecting either side. And I'm going to have the bullhorn maybe be something like that. And it looks like I need to move everything over now. So I'm going to grab all of these, hit P, and just slide them over in the X. Cool. So now we have them slid over. And I'm also going to bring these back to the right a little bit. I want the middle section to be a little bigger. I'm also going to grab these and pull them out a little more, and then do the same thing and move all of the layers over just a little bit. And we can also pull up the title action safe here by clicking this, and we can see where the exact middle is here on the composition. So that gives us an idea of how far away we are. Cool. So let's make one more layer here. That's going to be kind of the rim of the bullhorn. So I'll go New, Solid, and instead of being 90%, let's do something like 75. So we're kind of splitting the difference between this gray and that gray there. I'll just call this rim. And now I will grab the rounded rectangle tool again, and let's go to the rim and click drag it. And let's just make it kind of be like a narrow rim here. Something like that. I'm going to let go, and then I'm going to align it vertically, because we know all of these layers so far are aligned vertically. Cool, so now let's make the handle real quick. I'll right click. We can also right click here, so I'm going to right click and say New Solid. Let's just make this be somewhat of a black. I usually don't like to go all the way totally black, because then we don't leave ourselves anywhere to go. So I'll say Handle. And now I'll create the handle with the same tool over here. And even though I'm going to have the handle be somewhat angled, I'm just going to leave this up and down for now. And then we can double click this and rotate it. If we hover our cursor over here at the edge, we get this rotation tool. So now I can rotate it a little bit. If I hold down Shift, it'll go at 90 and 45 degrees. I don't want it to be at 45 degrees, so I'm going to let go of Shift and do this myself just by my eyes. And let's make this be a little bit smaller and get this back up. Maybe rotate it just a touch. We can also move the pivot point over here, and we can pivot from the top. So let's do something like that and hit Enter. And now let's put this on the bottom so it is behind all of these. So I'll go down here and put it at the bottom. I'm just click dragging it down to the bottom. So I'm going to minimize all these so we can kind of see what we've created so far. And we basically have a megaphone. That's pretty cool. So let's actually take these and give it a little more space, because we can see this distance from here, from this edge to that edge, is much greater from this edge to that edge. So let's try to get it back in the middle a little bit. So I'll Shift select everything, hit P, and then just drag these over and kind of keep an eye on this distance here and try to match that a little bit better. Cool. Now let's give this some dimensionality by adding a shadow to the microphone itself, and then also adding a long shadow here. first let's start with the long shadow. I will create an adjustment layer actually and say new, actually let me do it up here so you can see the menu. Say new adjustment layer. And nothing really happens. It's because adjustment layers are blank, okay? We need to add effects to them so that we can see them. So I'm just going to turn off the title action save here so that we can see what we're doing. And I'm going to call this long shadow. So for this adjustment layer, and I'll just say underscore adjustment so we can tell that it's an adjustment layer, not a solid. We are going to actually just create an adjustment here under the color correction. So I'll go down to something like curves. You could also go to levels. It doesn't really matter which one you choose because they can both have a similar effect. So we wanted to put this below all of the megaphone stuff. We just want it on the background, okay? So when we turn this on and off with the eye, we can see that it's changing the actual color beneath it. And I'm just moving the gamma here, which is kind of the midpoint. You can see this little arrow here move around. That's the midpoint of the histogram. So I'm just going to drop that down a little bit. And now let's mask out this adjustment to pretend like it's the shadow. So I'm going to click this, and with this layer selected, I'm going to click and drag an adjustment layer mask, and you can see that it's created a mask here called mask 1. So let's duplicate this out. Now we have mask 2. They're right on top of each other. So let's just move this over here. And the reason why I'm doing them together is because I want to rotate them to be at the same angle, okay? So I'm going to hit enter, and then I'm going to click drag so we get both of them. Then I'm going to double click one of them. So now you can see we can rotate both of them. So we just want to make sure that our shadow is consistent, has a consistent angle. And we can do something maybe like this, and I'm basically looking at this edge over here, and I'm going to line this up so that it comes off of this. And I did 2 of these masks because we need one for this edge and one for this edge of the handle. So we have one for the butt over here, the rear end of it, the back of the microphone, of the megaphone, and then we have the handle down here. So I'm going to hit enter, and now they're at the same angle. But we have 2 separate masks that we can move around. So I'm just going to line this one up. I'm going to zoom in and hold down spacebar, and I'm hitting Command and plus to zoom in. So I'm just going to move this to the edge of the handle here, and then I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to grab these 4 endpoints, and I'm going to drag these over to the tip of the microphone, the megaphone here. So now we have the shadow coming off of this. We can see we get a little corner here. That's not a big deal. What we can do is just click and drag that so it doesn't get over that edge there. Cool. So let's do the same thing for the rear end part here. Let me zoom in. It looks like it's maybe not exactly on there. So instead of actually clicking this dot, you can select one of the long lines or just anywhere on the line, and it'll select the 2 points that are in between it. So I know I want this edge to be the same angle. So I'm going to select this edge and then just hold down shift and press up until I get it right on that edge. So I can zoom out now, and let's take a look at this. Looks pretty cool. We need to fix this mask part here, and I'm just going to drag that down. We don't need to worry about anything else about that. And now we have this kind of long shadow. And the reason why it's important to do an adjustment is because if later that we decide we want to change the color of this background, then it won't matter because we just made an adjustment layer. So we can change this color all we want. And let's just go ahead and do that to show you an example. I'll go to generate fill, and we can see that as I change the color, that shadow stays there as long as it doesn't get like super bright, because we're changing the gamma. That was the adjustment that we did there. So if we get super bright, then there's no gamma to adjust because it's all white. So that's why when you get too dark or too bright, you're not going to see that adjustment. But yeah, we could just change the color and we still have that shadow. So that's why we use an adjustment layer to create the shadow instead of another shape. So we can leave that to be purple, you know, whatever. That works for me. And let's take this mask here and clip this one with that mask. All right. So we have this megaphone kind of circle here. We have that as a mask. We can copy that, Command C, and then click the adjustment layer and hit Command V. So we had moved the adjustment layer, the megaphone, so it looks like the mask is not exactly in the right spot. So it's not a big deal. We can just move that back up to be where we want it. I'll just hit enter. So the only thing we have left to do is to just change this circle mask to a mode of difference, or sorry, intersect. Let's do intersect. Cool, yeah, so where it intersects with these other masks, it's gonna subtract it out. So now if we select off of this, we can see that indeed this long shadow exists. And you know, if it's a little wonky and not exactly where we want it to be, we can just zoom in here and use the arrow tools here to make sure it's right on the edge of that stuff. Cool. So now we've created that. Let's create a shadow for the megaphone itself. All right, so let's pre-compose all of these masks. I'm going to drop these down. I'm going to go to Layer Pre-compose, and I'm going to say megaphone. And now we have the megaphone. We can duplicate that. Okay, and let's do the same thing. Same kind of idea. All right, let's take an adjustment to that, a color correction rather, to that duplicated version. So we can say, you know, whatever, let's do something different. Let's do exposure. Let's drop the exposure of this thing down. And now let's use a mask for that shadow, that darker version. I'm just going to grab the rectangle and go about halfway. I can hold down spacebar to move it while I still have left mouse clicked. And now I'll hit V and click over here. And you can see that we have created a shadow for the microphone itself. The megaphone, I keep saying microphone. The megaphone is now shadowed there. And we have this long shadow for that. We did that all with masks. We didn't have to go into Illustrator. And now we have this asset that we could use. And we could call this, you know, megaphone, whatever. We could actually turn off the background. And let's see this with the transparency so we know there's actually no background there. If we're using this in a project, we could actually just go, well, yeah. Well, first off, I called two compositions megaphones. So we have two megaphones over here. So I'm just going to say Precomp for this one. And we can see this one has the background. So let's say this is the main, and we want to use it in a new composition. Let's just click and drag it there. So now we have this entire icon, which is just one layer. So now we can animate this whole thing as we want to. So there you have it. That's how you use masks to create and illustrate inside of After Effects to use different icons, which you'll revisit over and over again when you're doing explainer videos, especially because you need visual representations for ideas and objects and different parts of the script. So this is one example of using and creating a megaphone with a long shadow and being self-shadowed, all with layer masks and solids. Thanks for watching.